Under the cover of darkness, the masked night thief set his sights on Chief Agila's mansion. Known for his greed, Chief Agila had hoarded sacks of millet and yams while the villagers starved. That night, the thief slipped past the guards, scaled the walls, and crept into the granary. He worked quickly, filling baskets with the stored food and leaving behind a note pinned to the door. "The hungry will eat." By morning, the granary was empty, and the villagers found the food neatly laid out in the square. The chief's loss became the villagers' gain, and they whispered of the masked night thief, their unseen hero. This is how the story of the masked night thieves began. Once upon a time, in the heart of the vast African savanna, there lay a humble village called Banzaka. The villagers, though hardworking, were poor, struggling to survive under the heavy taxes imposed by their king. Yet, amid their suffering, whispers of hope filled the air, carried by the deeds of a mysterious hero, the masked night thief. Tobi was a young orphan, a boy with no family, no wealth, and no future, except for the hunger that gnawed at his stomach every day. His appearance was a reflection of the life he had been forced to live. His hair, a tangled mass of curls, had not known the touch of a comb in years. His skin, dark brown and rough, bore the marks of poverty. His clothes, once bright, were now ragged, torn by time and neglect. His face, thin and weathered, seemed older than his years, his eyes deep with the weight of hardship. By day, Tobi sat by the gates of the palace, a silent beggar hoping for scraps from the wealthy nobles who passed by. He was nothing more than a shadow to them, a nameless face in the crowd. But Princess Adanna, the king-only daughter, tall and beautiful, and known for her compassion, would often stop by to give him food and a kind word. None suspected that this quiet, unassuming boy was, in fact, the masked night thief. Tobi had lost his parents when he was just a boy. His mother had fallen ill due to hunger and malnutrition, and despite his best efforts, he couldn't save her. His father, once a proud and strong man, had succumbed to grief and hunger after the death of his wife. Left alone in the world, Tobi grew up without love or care. He begged for food, but the hunger never ceased. The wealthy villagers passed him by, leaving him to watch the disparity between the rich and the poor grow ever wider. It was the pain of his own loss and the injustice he saw every day that drove him to action. No longer willing to sit by while the rich lived in luxury, he vowed to change the fate of his people. And so, under the cover of night, Tobi transformed into the masked night thief. Donning a carved wooden mask that obscured his face, Tobi became a shadow in the night, a mysterious figure who took from the rich to give to the poor. He targeted the greedy, the selfish, the ones who hoarded wealth while the people around them starved. His most daring heist came when he infiltrated the mansion of Chief Agila, a man infamous for his cruelty. Agila's storerooms were filled with sacks of millet, yams, and cassava, luxuries that the villagers could only dream of. On the night of the robbery, the masked night thief moved like a shadow. He scaled the high walls of Agila's mansion, using vines he had mapped out in advance. The guards, lulled by the quiet of the night, never saw him coming. He crept into the storeroom, unloading the sacks of food and filling his baskets with enough provisions to feed the entire village. When he was done, he left a note pinned to the granary door. "The hungry will eat." By morning, the village was abuzz with the discovery of the stolen food, neatly arranged in the village square. The people rejoiced, though none knew who had saved them. It wasn't the first time the masked night thief had struck, and it wouldn't be the last. His legend was growing, and so was the hope he brought to the villagers. On another occasion, the masked night thief targeted the wealthy merchant Bala, who had amassed great wealth by cheating the villagers with unfair trade. The thief snuck into Bala's storeroom, bypassing traps and guards, and took barrels of palm oil and crates of dried fish. By morning, the food had been distributed to the village households, ensuring no one went hungry that week. But the thief's most daring heist was when he stole a golden scepter from the king's treasury. The scepter, a symbol of the king's authority, was stored in a heavily guarded royal chamber. The thief, using his wits and agility, outsmarted the guards and escaped with the scepter. Days later, the villagers found it embedded in a stone at the village's edge, a symbolic reminder that true power belonged to the people. Despite his growing legend, Tobi lived a double life. By day, he was a poor orphan, begging for scraps by the palace gates. By night, he was a masked hero, risking everything to bring food and wealth to the starving villagers. He was driven by a sense of justice, not bitterness. The people saw him only as a nameless figure, a symbol of hope that they could never touch. But Tobi knew that he was doing something important, something that could change the future of Banzaka. Princess Adanna, the kind-hearted daughter of the king, had heard the stories of the masked night thief. Intrigued by the tales of his bravery and generosity, she longed to meet him. How could someone so bold and selfless exist in a world filled with so much greed? She was captivated by the idea of the thief, and soon she found herself in love with the hero she had never met. Meanwhile, the king's frustration grew. The repeated thefts were a challenge to his rule, and he decided to capture the masked night thief. He set a trap, ordering a grand feast to be held at the palace, with storerooms filled with treasure but heavily guarded. Hidden soldiers waited in the shadows, prepared to ambush the thief. That night, the masked night thief made his move. His instincts told him something was off, but he couldn't turn back now. As he entered the royal garden, the trap sprung. Guards closed in from all sides, and for the first time, the thief found himself cornered. Escape seemed impossible. It was then that Princess Adanna, who had been watching from the shadows, made her move. She stepped forward, her heart pounding. "This way," she whispered, gesturing toward a hidden passage behind the thick hedges. The thief, surprised but with no time to question her, followed. Adanna led him through the winding passageways of the palace, using her knowledge of the guards' patrols to avoid detection. They reached a concealed gate that opened onto the cliffs overlooking the river. "Jump," she urged, her voice trembling. "The river will carry you to safety." The thief hesitated, looking into her eyes. Though she could not see his face behind the mask, she felt the depth of his gratitude. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice low but sincere. The sound of the approaching guards grew louder. In a final moment of trust, the thief leaped from the cliff into the rushing waters below. The king's soldiers arrived too late, witnessing only a splash as the river carried the figure away. They searched the riverbanks, but found no trace of him. Word quickly spread to the village. The masked night thief had perished in the waters. The villagers mourned the loss of their hero. But Princess Adanna could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. One day, as she walked past the palace gates, she noticed that Tobi, the orphan boy she often fed, was no longer there. Her heart ached with a sudden realization. Perhaps the masked night thief had been closer to her than she had ever known. A week passed in silence. Then, one morning, something extraordinary happened. At the heart of the village square, where the villagers gathered daily, the wooden mask of the masked night thief lay gleaming in the sunlight. The villagers gasped. The mask, a symbol of their hero, was a sign. "He's alive," an old woman exclaimed. "Our savior has returned," a young man cried out in joy. The villagers celebrated with newfound hope, knowing their hero was still watching over them. Though the masked night thief did not appear in person, the sight of his mask reignited their spirits. They knew that their hero would return when they needed him most. Princess Adanna, too, heard of the mask's reappearance. A soft smile touched her lips as she thought of the thief. Perhaps one day she would meet the man behind the mask and thank him, not just for his bravery, but for the light he had brought to the lives of the people of Banzaka. And so, the legend of the masked night thief lived on, a tale of courage, mystery, and the unyielding spirit of a hero who put his people above all else.